Welcome back to the Burgundy and Gold review. This is Jess of HTTR.Nation, joined by my co-host Sam of WSH Football 365. Those are both of our usernames on Instagram. Check us out if you aren't already. And it is never a dull week with the news of the Washington football team, as over the past few days, some new stories have come out. First off, Washington signed tight end Samise Reyes, an international athletic Chilean player. The news about the bromance of Dan Snyder and Bruce Allen being over with, what needs Washington to try and add talent at in the draft, and some day 2 draft selections we hope to see. Let's dive into it.
Some exciting and slightly unpredictable news this week as Washington football team signed tight end Samise Reyes, a Chilean basketball player. 6'7", has a 40-inch vertical, runs a 4.6 40. Participated at the Florida Pro Day, but played basketball at the University of Tulane. Follows guys like Jimmy Graham, Antonio Gates, Tony Gonzalez that were Division I athletes in basketball who are trying to make an attempt to switch to tight end in the NFL. This kid has absolutely freakish athletic talent. That alone got him the look for the NFL, considering he's only been playing the sport of football for 10 weeks. He's been training with some guys, notably ex-Washington tight end Logan Paulson, trained with him, and a few others as well. It's a very, very interesting prospect. Not sure how it's going to turn out, but, Washington has a huge need at tight end, and he's insanely athletic. How do you feel about this signing, Jess?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned all those athletic traits, which is enough reason alone to take a flyer on him. And, I mean, looking at Washington's tight end depth chart right now, not very inspiring. They lost Jeremy Sprinkle, quote unquote, lost Jeremy Sprinkle in free agency. Logan Thomas, he's still penciled in as a starter, but the only guy who has a career NFL reception, or the only guys who have career NFL receptions behind him, are Tamara Hemingway and Marcus Baugh, who combined for 12 yards last year. So Washington needs some juice tight end. I mean, the athletic profile of Reyes is exciting. I'm excited to see what he can do with tight end coach Pete Werner. It's also worth noting that some of the other tight ends in Washington's group, you got Tyrone Swoops, who's a former quarterback. We all know Thomas is a former quarterback. This other guy, Dylan Cantrell, a former wide receiver turned tight end. So a lot of kind of projects all in that room. So that's an interesting trend.
Yeah, you brought up Pat Werner. It'd be interesting to see what he does with Reyes, as you see what he did last year with Logan Thomas and his raw ability. Part of me wants to err on the side of caution, though, on the excitement part, for the simple fact that with this fan base, we have been missing star players for so long that I think that we sometimes get over enamored with the possibility of a player being very good. Just reminds me of times like Simi Cobbs getting plucked off the practice squad, and many other examples. And I'm not trying to put a dull to the shine of this signing because it's a great story, but I think it's important to be realistic about it and not expect him to come in and be the next Antonio Gates. If they get anything out of him, if they get a tight end 3 out of him, that's pretty darn good. It'll still be exciting to see what happens, though.
Yeah, you hit it. I don't really have huge expectations, or at least, I've seen people saying he could be tight end. He's tight end 2 going into the season right now, which is crazy to even talk about. But I think he can at least maybe have some exciting plays, maybe impress some people in training camp, and he could hopefully stick around on at least a practice squad for a year. So low risk, obviously, very, very high reward signing. Nothing else you can do but like it.
Absolutely, and you really like to see him choosing the Washington football team over 20 different teams. It definitely gives you hope for the future and proof that we do have a changing culture. So that was a pretty cool little tidbit that I enjoyed.
I think that also has to do with tight end coach Pete Werner, though. You briefly mentioned his resume for a second. Worked with Logan Thomas last year, obviously career year for Thomas. Also worked with Olsen for about a decade in Carolina. Worked with Delaney Walker and Vernon Davis in San Francisco. So he's got some notable guys that he has helped turn into good players over the years.
Without a doubt, and I'm sure he saw the opening on the roster as well, so that probably came into play as well.
Some semi decent news in the new hunt for a team name. Washington emailed two separate lists of possible name options for fans to vote on. And I mean, Sam and I are both looking at two different ones right now. I mean, the ones I'm looking at, uh, there's like at least one, maybe two that calls me. Washington Griffins, Washington Warriors, Washington Armada, Rising, Swifts, Commanders, Pilots. These are kind of all over the place. I'm not gonna lie.
The Washington Wild Hogs makes me feel like you're gonna have Tim Allen on a motorcycle on the helmet as the mascot.
Wild Hogs, no chance. I don't know where they even got, because we've all heard about Warriors, we've all heard about Red Wolves, we've all somewhat heard about Red Tails. I don't know if that was on the list or not, but
It is, yeah.
some of these other ones have like come out of nowhere, and they are.
I
Yeah,
can't, like, part of me like can't even take this like seriously, and for lack of a better term, I feel like they're just taking crap, throwing it at a wall, and seeing what sticks. Maybe to like boost up the other ones. It's very strange.
maybe, but the Washington Rubies, like the gem. I mean, is that? I don't know what else. What other Rubies there are?
I saw like one was the Washington Defenders. I'm like, how are we gonna have the same name as the XFL team?
Oh no, we're not. We are not taking inspiration from that. I will say one that came out of nowhere that I kind of like is the Armada.
Yeah, I kind of like that. That one's pretty cool.
It's not my top pick, but of these like new ones that are like completely blindside, Armada's pretty good.
The Washington Wayfarers. What does that even mean?
Wayfarers, is that? I swear that's like I've heard that in a commercial or something.
There's like a furniture company called Wayfair. That's just
Yeah,
like
that's
Amazon for furniture.
That's what. Oh my gosh.
And there's like a big like I don't even want to get into it. That's just not going to be the name. It's terrible.
Have you seen this one? The Washington Capital City Football Club.
I'm looking at it right now. The CCFC. Number one, I saw JP Finley make a good point. Nobody calls DC Capital City. Like they don't, and I mean, I feel like what you just state football team at that point.
But everybody just calls them Washington, or people still say the Washington Redskins. But
yeah,
I don't. I mean, I personally am pulling for the Washington Warriors. But what you got a favorite pick?
I'm Red Wolves all the way, baby.
Red Wolves.
Ooh. Red Wolves all the way. Still am.
I can't say I'm a big Red Wolves guy.
I love it. I think it's cool.
Warriors. I like Warriors. I think that's an easy. The big thing I think with Warriors is they've already kind of reestablished the new W.
Yeah.
That's kind of like been the new logo. It's, people have gotten used to it. People bought merch with it. So I think like keeping it, at least the alliteration of the Washington Warriors, it still you can still do this with just keep the W for Washington. But I think that the main thing is like brand around the W is my biggest hope for them, is keep the logo. Like we don't need a new logo.
I can see them doing that. Like, I also like think that Dan Snyder is going to want an opportunity to just make all new stuff and make more money off of it again. So I don't know. The colors they already said they're going to keep. I do agree with you. The W though, I like the W, and I think they should build around it. But I'm not 100% certain they're going to.
Yeah.
That's
a good point of the merchandise, but
still like fairly early in the process, I guess. But at least they're talking about narrowing down names at this point.
We're until 2022 though, so we still got 8 months?
Yeah, still got
at least.
We're about like halfway through. We're about actually exactly halfway through like the point of them changing the name to like finding out what the new one's going to be.
Yeah.
Because what they do, change it. They announced the change last July.
In July.
So that's like roughly 8 months, 9, 8, 9, 10, roughly. So we're about halfway through this process.
It's a long one.
It's a long one, and like it still doesn't feel right. But
no, I mean everyone in the area, let's be honest, everyone in the area still knows them as the Washington Redskins. But
for sure. And that's like why part of me, like, I don't know if they're gonna do Warriors, because I know I've read where they didn't want like to leave the opportunity for fans to like make it about indigenous people anymore. But I mean,
think they
for me,
probably
like, I feel like they use it as like a military anecdote, but I feel like people would still show up and be like, "I'm a warrior" with like headdresses on and stuff.
Yeah, I mean there's a possibility of that, but I think it'd probably be military oriented. But I mean
Yeah,
that's back when Rivera was leading the search before Wright got hired in August. But then Wright
sure.
kind of took over the project. So I'm not sure how much of that military impact like of Rivera would still be existent now.
Gosh,
But
I can't believe that they like how far like they have such a far way to go, but I had forgotten that like Rivera was in charge of that. Like that's just wild to think about.
oh yeah, and it was all him until Wright got hired in late August, I believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and so that's like a month. That was like at least 3 weeks of Rivera having to both handle football and business operations for the team.
He should have won coach of the year. I mean, like, I still like I will die on that hill. He should have won coach of the year.
So this morning, a somewhat bombshell article dropped from Daniel Kaplan of The Athletic saying that Washington's Daniel Snyder is coming after ex-team president and general manager Bruce Allen in the current legal issues that Snyder is dealing with right now. And so it's obviously easy to get confused with how much legality is going on with Snyder off the field. There's obviously the whole name fiasco. There was the Beth Wilkinson independent NFL investigation and Snyder's minority owners with the team. But this other one is in relation to some defamation articles of Snyder that came out last summer. And we don't have to go into the whole legality of it, but it's just crazy to me that it's gotten to the point where Snyder, who is now coming after the man he was buddy with, Brucey, who we could not get rid of for 10 years, is now the target of court proceedings. I mean, it just goes to show how much can change.
I've gotten used to over the last however many years that I've followed this team for Dan to basically be in at least 1 to 10 legal battles at the same time all the time. But I can say that I never saw this happening um, up until everything happened last year. Like I could have never seen this happening. Like you said, it's crazy. I don't understand the ins and outs of it, and I don't think any of us truly will unless we're like sitting there in the courtroom or one of their lawyers or were Bruce and Dan themselves. But like you said, it goes to show how much can change in such a short period of time. It'll be interesting to see what happens as a result of this and what more dirt is brought up and what will be brought to media attention. Um, and also what will be truth and untruth for us to sift through. But it's definitely interesting, and I'm pretty sick and tired of hearing about Bruce and Dan, and definitely want to move forward. But kind of makes you hard. What side do you pick here? Like, you don't like either guy, so it's like, man, I kind of just hope both teams lose. But yeah, it's definitely a weird situation and very ironic in the grand course of this franchise.
It is interesting. I think it would be interesting if somebody made a like a chronological just documentation of every single one of Snyder's legal issues in his tenure as owner, because there's at least like 7 that comes to mind for me. And there's 4. There have been 4 in the past year. So it's just
Yeah,
how much
if it,
controversy he has brought off field, let alone the controversial product on the field or controversial stuff happening within the organization, just like outside of Washington, or at least Washington football, how much is going on under his reign.
yeah, if anybody out there listening wants to put together a list, I'd be happy to read it off on one of the episodes because that would be something to be something to behold, to put it into perspective, like you said.
I feel like it'd be equivalent to that famous Browns jersey that had every Browns player, and it'd just be like 2002, 2003, 4, just like endless or different like case numbers and whatnot. But
Oh
yeah,
man.
there's definitely a lot. Just like I said, just right off my head, I can think of multiple. So it is. Yeah, we don't have to spend any more time on Snyder.
Yeah, Snyder's cases speak for himself. We'll follow this closely as it or loosely. We'll just follow it as it goes. The draft is approaching closer and closer every single day, and we are down to 2 weeks from draft day, as today is Thursday, April 15th at 4:15 p.m. Today we're going to talk about a couple day 2 guys that we might be interested in, and that we gave a couple day 1 guys that we were interested in last episode. And as we get into the second round, start getting more into depths and players that can still make an impact in the starting lineup. Jess, what are your tiers?
Well, I think there's 4 kind of ways that Washington needs to address their roster moving into the draft. On day 2 specifically, so rounds 2 and 3, they've got 3 picks. I think it's 51 in round 2, 74, and then 82 in round 3. And so they got some decent selections they can make. I mean, there's tier 1 they have to address, which is tier 1's the must-get position, which they need somebody like a starter, someone with talent, someone that can be an instant upgrade in that addition, or that position, excuse me. Then you've got tier 2, needs upgrade, where there's, I guess, some guy that is replaceable on the depth chart that Washington can take a flyer on somebody we can see. So, like, I mean, Antonio Gibson, we didn't think he was going to be a starter when he got drafted, and he ended up rushing for 900 yards last year and 11 touchdowns. So that's what I'd kind of say tier 2 is, someone who a replaceable player on offense or defense that Washington can easily upgrade. Tier 3 just need more guys at the position, and that kind of tier 3 and tier 4 are somewhat similar in terms of need more depth. So how do you want to kind of break down this Washington's roster? I guess tier 1 must get. What would you do?
For me, tier 1 must get is still tight end. Regardless of the Samise Reyes signing, there's still a major drop off, which you touched on, with Hemingway and Ball being the only other players at the position on the roster with any NFL experience in a game whatsoever. So I have a guy like Pat Freiermuth from Penn State there. Very physical guy. He's not going to blow you out of the water with his athleticism, but he's more like a Logan Thomas type where he's going to catch the ball and run straight through you. And very physical downhill runner and good at blocking as well. So for me, tight end is a tier 1 immediate need in round 2.
I agree with the need of the position, but I don't think Freiermuth is going to make it to 51. I think he probably goes late 30s, early 40s. I agree that, like I said, Washington needs, I mean, we talked about earlier in the episode, Washington needs someone behind Logan Thomas. So I think the value won't be there at 51, assuming Freiermuth's gone. And that's where I think somebody like Tommy Tremble from Notre Dame or Hunter Long from Boston College could really come into play, and with one of those round 3 picks. I mean, both, we don't have to get into the specifics of both those guys, but 2 additions I would really like to see them swing at if, let's say, Freiermuth doesn't fall to them.
Yeah, I know it's probably not very likely that he falls that far, but I'm just hoping with the amount of positional talent in this draft that he might end up getting pushed down a little bit and we can grab him.
I'd say for my tier 1 from us get, Washington needs a linebacker. John Bostic, there's some talk about possibly, at least in the fan base, talk about upgrading him. That didn't happen. Staff supposedly really likes him. Obviously, have Cole Holcomb penciled in at one spot, but he still needs to improve as a player. Khaleke Hudson, he had a couple nice plays last year. I remember the one on special teams against Dallas and the one against the Seahawks. But Washington still needs a starter there, and that is where day 2, I'm assuming they address the position day 1, but day 2, if they don't, Dylan Moses round 3, I like him. Pete Werner, that's a guy that John Keim has tossed out there. Any of those guys interest you?
Yeah, I like Pete Werner a lot. Ohio State has a tendency of pumping out good linebackers, and we have coaches that have the tendency of developing them as well. I like that he's a 4-year player. Like that he has a lot of big game experience, obviously playing at Ohio State in the Big Ten. Yeah, Pete Werner would be a good addition to the team. I'm not sure if I'd get him in the 2nd, maybe the 3rd, maybe the 4th. Linebacker I'd have interest in is Nick Bolton out of Mizzou. He'd probably be a 2nd-round pick if they don't address linebacker position in the 1st. I think that's my other like top-tier position of need in the 2nd is linebacker. Bolton's a very not super athletic guy, but he's very good in coverage in minimal tape that he has. He's shown flashes of very good ability to develop into a good coverage linebacker. Also tackles pretty well, playing the SEC, so he's not shy to top talent. But yeah, Nick Bolton out of Mizzou, somebody for me to watch in the second round.
I think I'm at least in favor of Washington still upgrading at wide receiver. Obviously, they signed Humphreys and Samuel. Terry's going to be Terry, but Samuel, I mean, I somewhat voiced my concerns a few episodes back on that. Humphreys, good player, but I think Washington can do a bit better, and I really hope they just add some more talent in there, and that's where guys like North Carolina's Diami Brown comes into play, Michigan's Nico Collins, Purdue's Rondell Moore, USC's Amon-Ra St. Brown. So 4 guys that I'd actually like Washington to add, whether it be because of their physicality, their versatility, their speed, their upside, their blocking. Any of those 4 I would be super happy to come away with on day 2.
I fully agree with you on that, actually, and that there's too much talent at the wide receiver position to pass up in this draft, and they might be able to wait a little longer and get somebody really good, especially one of the 4 that you mentioned, because like I've said before, I think a lot of guys are going to get pushed down the draft board, and we could get a very, very good talent at a very, very good value that they seem to have done well over the last few years. That's all we have for you today, guys, and thanks so much for tuning in. If you like what you hear, comment, like, and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Google, and Amazon. And sure to follow us on our personal Instagrams. Mine is WSH Football 365, and Jess's is httr.nation, both on Instagram. If you'd like to follow our other handles for Twitter and Instagram, it's at the BNG Review. That's at the B, the letter N, G Review on Twitter and Instagram. We'll talk to you next time.